So if you've gathered, we're talking NextAuth. Now, everybody hates authentication. It takes a long time to set up, and if you're handling it by yourself, you need databases, ways to create JWTs, and handle sessions, timeouts, cookies, and more. So in this video, NextAuth is going to take care of email sign-in, GitHub sign-in, and Twitter sign-in. And then, after that, we're going to use Auth0 to handle all of this. So you'll be able to sign in using just Auth0, and NextAuth will handle the rest. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to protect a route and have somebody sign in and prove that they've actually signed in. So first, let's talk about NextAuth and the steps that you're going to need before you can follow this video. Let's get into it. So here we are on the NextAuth.js website, and below is about as much code as we're going to be writing today, at least for authentication. This side right here is about as much as we're going to be writing. So now we've covered really NextAuth and what we're going to be doing and how much code we're going to be writing. You do need to do a few things first before you can do this tutorial. Step 1, apply for your developer account through Twitter. Step 2, go to Auth0 and sign up for a free account. And if you're not doing the Auth0, you can skip this, but I highly recommend it. It is fantastic. Thirdly, you're going to need a SendGrid account by Twilio if you're going to be doing the email portion of this tutorial, which is basically if you want to be able to sign in via email, you're going to need a SendGrid account. You're also going to need SQLite. You could swap this out for MongoDB, MS SQL, MariaDB, any of those ones. I'm just using SQLite because it's easier for me to show you guys how it works without having to go and sign up for something else. So if you have a preferred DB provider such as Mongo, you can go ahead and use that. And then in the future, we will talk about how to set up GitHub for this, but that's more down the line. So once you've done all those things, go ahead, boot up Visual Studio Code, and let's start coding. So I've just created a simple Next app using the create Next app script, and I've just removed everything as I usually would before starting tutorials. The head is here, and then the main class is here. So before we get started, we need to install a few things. So first, let's do npm install and do next-auth, and we're also going to do SQLite 3. Obviously, if you're using MongoDB or MariaDB or SQL, MS SQL, whatever you're using, you're just going to have to install that package. But for this example, SQLite 3, and go ahead and hit enter. So once they've both been installed, we're done installing dependencies today. Very small amount of dependencies to get this all up and running. So now that's all installed, let's talk about what we're going to be doing here. So because we're doing server-side code here, we're going to need an API route. So go ahead and create a folder called auth, and then inside of that, we're going to create a dynamic route. Now, if you don't remember what this is, it's a set of square brackets with something inside. So for this one, we're going to do ... NextAuth.js. And we're not going to have anything in there for now. And then that's going to be everything until we start really doing a lot of code. So the NextAuth is essentially going to handle all the different providers that we could possibly want. Now, the way this works is you're going to import NextAuth, and that's coming directly from NextAuth. Then you need to import providers, which is the way of telling it which provider you're going to be using based on their support providers. So you just do next-auth/providers. So now you've installed all of that. At this point, you can now do the configuration part. So we're going to do const options equals, and then a set of braces. Then we're going to make a providers array that's going to handle all of our providers. So you just type the word providers, and then you're going to do a set of square brackets for the array, and then you just type the word provider like this, and then you can select the ones that you want. So we're going to want GitHub, And inside of here, we're going to need two things. And they're just the generic configurations. So it's client ID and client secret. And for now, we're just going to put some empty strings here. And make sure to put your comma. And that's it. So that's how you set up a new provider. So you can see how easy it is for NextAuth to work. You come in here, you add a new provider, you provide the important pieces that it needs, and NextAuth does the rest for you. Obviously, there's extendability around the things you can do, such as do you want to use JWTs, session times, how long before they expire, cookies, etc., etc. But we're just going to show you how to set up the simplest and easiest way using their built-in functionality. So now we have a provider called GitHub. We should just copy and paste this. And instead of the word GitHub, we're just going to type the word Twitter. And then we're going to do a provider here called providers.email. And inside of here, we're going to have the word server. And inside of that, we're going to have a host, which we'll just put as an empty string. And then we're also going to have the port. And we're going to fill this out and talk about it later, but I will at least want to put the bare bones in. And then secondly, the auth. And then we can just put user and pass. And that will take care of the server part. Then we need to tell it who we're sending this email from. So underneath here, you can just type the word from, and we'll put an empty string. And then that will handle the basics. What we're going to do first before we handle auth 0. So go ahead and hit save here. And now we need to really work on how to do a provider for GitHub, how to do Twitter, how to do email, etc. But before we do that, let's actually build out a page. And that page is just going to be our index.js here. And we're going to fill it full of, hey, if you're in a session, you get to see this screen. And if you're not in a session, we'll show a different screen. So head over to your index.js. And at the top, we're going to import a couple of things. So first, let's import React from React. We're also going to import link from next/link. And we're going to handle some built-ins from NextAuth. More specifically, we're going to import sign in, sign out, and use session. And that's coming from next-auth/client. And that's it. That's all we need to import to handle everything we want to do on this page. So let's hit save here and let's talk about a few things. So what's great about NextAuth is it has built-in sign-in functionality, sign-out functionality, and the ability to look at sessions. So now we've imported that. Now we need to talk about handling the session. So we're going to create use state here. And it's going to be a little different than using the regular use state. We're actually going to use this use session. So just type the word session and loading, and we'll use session. And just like that, now we have the ability to access the session. So the most important thing here is we actually need to extend our app.js to handle anything that comes through props. So essentially what we can do is pass around the session so that each page that we use knows we have a session. So before we do this, go into your app.js, and in here, we're just going to import provider, and that's going to come from the NextAuth/client. And all we're going to do here is wrap this in the provider. So you can just do that by opening up a set here and typing the word provider, type the word session, and then do page props.session. So anytime the session is passed around as part of your page properties, we'll be able to handle that. Then we can just take this component here, cut it out, paste it in here, so that now it's wrapped in this provider, and then we just need to change our return. So just put a return up the top, and then open a set of parentheses, and put that at the end. So now what we're doing is providing the ability to pass the session around. So wherever we go, we can have the session. So flip back to your index.js. Now we know that at least at our level, the session is always going to be available, even if we move pages and not just on this one. So what I'm going to do here is basically say, inside of this main, we're going to do essentially, we're going to ask it if there's a session, we want to show one screen. If there isn't a session, we want to show a different one. So go ahead and delete this h1 out so that we just got a main class and say, if there's no session, and then we can just do this. And this basically says, if there's no session, then we're just going to display not signed in. And then we can say underneath that, just a button here. And the button says on click equals sign in. And then we can just say sign in. So what we're doing here is we're using this built-in. Now imagine if you had to write this yourself, you'd have to write the ability to say sign in, and when you clicked on it, you display a different page, and that handles your sign in. But with this, we don't really need to worry about this. So let's just put a line break in here like this, just so that we can handle this being on a new line. So now we have this version, we actually need the opposite of this. So we can just do another set here and say session, and then with a fragment, we can handle what happens when we're signed in. We can just say signed in as, and then using the session, there is a user, and there is a property called email. And then we'll just put another line break here instead of having to style this out. And then underneath, we're just going to write div, you can now access our super secret pages. And then underneath here, at some point, we'll implement a new page. So now we have that. We also need the ability to sign out. So we'll just add a button here, and that button will just say sign out. And then the on-click handler, as you saw previously, will just be the word sign out, which is a built-in from NextAuth. So far, basically, we've just handled everything using NextAuth. We haven't written any real code except from some HTML, and that is it. So we've basically handled everything here, but we really need to do the hard work here. We need to be able to provide this information. So let's start with GitHub. It's super simple. And we'll move on to Twitter. Then we'll do our email, which is a bit more in depth. And then we'll test it out and see what it looks like for us. And then we'll implement a super secret page that you can't access unless you're signed in. So the first thing you need to do is create a .env file, and this is where we're going to handle all of our secrets, all of our API keys, all of our GitHub stuff, Twitter stuff, Auth0 when we get there, our email server and password, all that kind of stuff. So first, let's just type the word GitHub_ID and put an equals here, and we'll do GitHub_secret. Put an equals here. We'll do a Twitter_ID, Twitter_secret. And then we'll also do the Auth0 one, which will be client ID, Auth0 client secrets, and the Auth0 domain. And then for our email, we need email_server user, email server password. And we're also going to need the email server host. And of course, we need a port number to tell it which port number to use. And this port number is the same for pretty much all email, at least when you're in development, and which email we're sending from. Then we also need NextAuth URL. And this is the URL that you're going to be using when you're in development, when you're in production, or wherever you're going to be. So for this, for now, just type in HTTP localhost 3000. And finally, we need one more thing, and that's the database URL. Now, the database URL is fairly simple because we're using SQLite here. It's just going to be SQLite / localhost, because that's what we're on. And then we're going to tell it that we're in memory. And this just says, I'm in memory. Simple. So now we have that. We can go ahead and hit save. And now we're ready to get whatever we need. So let's flip to the GitHub page, and I'll show you how to create an Oauth account so that you can test this out. So here we are on the GitHub page. You can do this at github.com/settings/application/new. And it prompts you to fill in all this information. So I just gave the application a name of NextAuth example. I gave it jamesperkins.io as the homepage URL and a quick description for myself. Now the authorization callback URL is the same for every provider when you use NextAuth. It's going to be HTTP or HTTPS, depending on if you're doing this locally or in development or on production. And you're going to do the URL is going to be the URL /API/auth/callback/ and then whatever the provider is. So this one will be GitHub. And then when we do Twitter, it will be Twitter, etc. Then go ahead and hit registration. This is not a valid URL. You are correct. And you're going to get a client ID here and a client secret once you click the generate button. So go ahead and copy this client ID and generate a new client secret and drop that into your .env. So now you've pasted all your stuff in for GitHub, we also need to do this for Twitter. So go ahead and sign into your developer.twitter.com applications, go to project apps and create a new project here. And we're just going to call this NextAuth example. It's going to give you your API key, secret, and bearer token. Just go ahead and write those down, copy them, put them somewhere safe, and click Enable Third-Party Authentication. And it's going to say, do you want to enable 3-legged OAuth is disabled? So go ahead and enable it, and you must click this button. Request email addresses from users. And then the callback is going to be the same scheme as before, which was HTTP localhost 3000 API auth/callback/Twitter. And then obviously you need to make sure you put your website in here or whatever you want to put. So I'll just put mine for now. You don't need an organization name, and go ahead and make sure that you fill out these two here. Because this is local, you don't need to worry about it. But if you're going to do this in an actual real world application, you need a privacy policy and you need a terms of service. Then go ahead and click save, and it will be enabled, and now it's ready to be used. So go ahead and copy the client ID and secret and drop it into your .env, and we'll be ready to test Twitter and GitHub. So let's go ahead and go back to the code, launch our application, and try it out. So we've dropped back into the code and we're in our NextAuth.js file, and we just need to change these first to process.env.github ID and respectively github.secret. So let's copy and paste that, drop that down and change this to secrets. And then obviously we need to do that for Twitter as well because we set up our Twitter account. And we'll just change this to Twitter_ID. And then we need our process.env Twitter secret. So at this point, we're actually ready to use this options here. But first, let's just go ahead and comment out our section here so that we're not using this by accident and it doesn't cause any problems in our code. So now we have all of that and it's ready to go. What we need to do is export this out. So you're going to do export default, and then you're going to do reg and request. And in here, we're going to use an arrow and say next auth, and then open it up and say rec, res, and options. And this will export this out, and we'll be able to use NextAuth wherever we need to. Go ahead and hit save. And now we should go ahead and run our application. So I'll meet you on the other side where I can show you the UI and how it all works. We've launched our local host and we have this very not exciting sign-in page. So we're obviously not signed in. So go ahead and click the sign in button and you get presented with this screen. And this is built by NextAuth. We don't have anything to do with it. I didn't write any code for this, as you can clearly see. And now we have two options. Sign in with GitHub, sign in with Twitter. So go ahead and click sign in with GitHub. And because I'm already signed into GitHub and I've already authorized this, it's told me already that I'm signed in as James Perkins at hey.com. Now, if I sign out here, automatically it brings us back to the same page. We can click sign in and we can click sign in with Twitter. And it says, it launches out to Twitter and tells us to sign out. So let's try this in an incognito window so you can see the full experience. So you click here and you click sign in, and it brings you up to this screen and says, do you want to use this NextAuth example? And then you have to sign in. Obviously, I'm not going to sign in here because you just saw the experience, but now we know that that part works. So far, so good. So at this point, what I want to do is build out our super secret page before we start digging into emails, so that if you don't want to include that, you don't have to watch the rest of the video or skip around. You know that your application works. So let's flip back to the code and take care of our super secret page. Inside the code, go ahead and create a new page called secret.js. And that secret.js file is also going to have an API that goes with it. And that API is going to take care of just returning some content for us. So go ahead and create a new folder here and call it secret. And inside that secret, let's create an index.js file. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to take care of the API layer first and then make the page. So first, import get session. And this is also a great feature. So get session will essentially get the session for us, so we don't have to handle how we should or shouldn't get our sessions. And that's also inside the NextAuth client. Then what we're going to do is export a default async function, as we do with every serverless function, and then we are good to go. So what we're going to do is create a constant up here called session. And inside that session, we're just going to wait for it, await get session, which is obviously imported from here. And then we're just going to put request. And that's it. Now we have a session, we can do whatever we want with it. So we can just write an if statement that says, if there's a session, we're going to go ahead and send something back. So we're going to send some content here. And we're going to say, welcome to the secret page. And that's it. That's all we need. Then we can say else. That's not how you spell else. Else. We can just in here say, okay, res.send. Error. You need to be signed in. And that's it. And that's all we're going to need to do our page here. So go ahead and hit save, and then let's handle that in our secret page. So first we need to import a few things. We're going to need use state because we're actually going to use the state that we have. We'll use a use effect, and that's coming directly from React. And then we need to import use session, and that's coming from NextAuth/client. So you can see how easy it is to pass things around here. We haven't really written a lot of code today so far, but you know, it's much less than if we wrote a whole authentication ourselves. So imagine if you could just implement this quickly on a website and you have full sign-in and session ability. So you're going to export a default function here, and we'll call this secret. And inside of this secret, first let's fix our spelling mistakes. Inside of here, we're going to have a const, and inside of here, we're going to have session, comma loading, and that's going to equal use session, just as we had before. And then we're going to have content and set content. And we'll just go ahead and use state here. So you can use use effect here, and essentially what we're going to do is ask it to go and fetch from our super secret and then return something depending on what's there. So what we can do is say const fetch data async, and then inside of here do something with the data. So as we've done in previous videos, const res equals await fetch, and then to our API route, which in this case is API/secret. Then we need the JSON, so we can just write the word JSON and say await res.json. And then we can just say if JSON.content. So essentially, if the JSON contains the word content, set the content to JSON.content. So essentially what we're saying there is in here, we have the word content. If it has that, we want to set it to this. Then, which is our fetch data, we can just do a tab here and say fetch data. And that will get our data. And then to make sure this only runs on a single session, we want to do comma here and write the word session. So at this point, this will actually get our data and let us know if there's is content or if there's not. So now that we have that, what we can do here is underneath this session, we can just use a quick trick here and say if type of window does not equal undefined and loading, just return null. Now this is a quick way of essentially handling if the page is not rendered yet, we won't actually display anything. Then we can do if there's no session, we can just do a return here and say main, and inside of there we'll do a div, and inside that div we'll just have an h1, and we'll just say you aren't signed in, please sign in first. Then underneath that we can then just do a second part, which will just be the regular return. So then we can just do a return and say main div, and then inside of that div we'll just put a h1 here that says protected page, and then underneath that we'll just do a p, and inside of that p we'll just do the content. So we can just do content, and that's it. So now we have this page, right? So we have this secret page that we can call upon when somebody clicks onto this page. So now we've done that, let's go into our index page and make a couple tweaks so that we can actually access this page. So inside of our index.js file, we have this session, and we have the you can now access the super secret pages. So inside of that, let's add a button here. And then inside of there, we'll add link, href, and then set that to secret. And we'll just call it to the secret. And now we have the ability to take care of that. So let's flip back into our code, take a look and make sure that all works. Then we can tackle email, and then finally we can tackle this with an Auth0 implementation without the bells and whistles of having to handle all of this ourselves. We can just have Auth0 do it all. So I'm already signed in as myself. So let's go ahead and click the to the secret page. And there you go. Welcome to the secret page. Now let's go ahead and sign out. And then let's just type in /secret. And we get, you aren't signed in. Please sign in first. So this route is now really protected. You have to be authenticated and have a session. Otherwise you can't get to this page. So we've taken care of all of that and everything seems to be working as expected. So let's tackle the way that you can do email through NextAuth. So once you've signed into your SendGrid account and you've created a sender identity, now this is literally just you type in your email address, they send you a link, you click it and it sets it up. You can now start sending emails. So go ahead and click the email API and click integration guide. Once that loads up, we're not going to be using the web APIs because NextAuth handles it for us. We're actually going to use the SMTP relay to do it. So go ahead and click that. And what you'll get is a screen here that says create your API key, and then you can type in a name here. So we'll just call this NextAuth example, and you hit create key, and you'll see that there's an API key here. So go ahead and grab that. Then we also need all this information here. The username is going to be API key, and that's not a joke. It's actually API key and not the API key name. This SMTP, the port that we're going to use is 587, and that's just because we're on localhost. Obviously, when you're using SSL, it needs to be 465. And then go ahead and take all of this information and then just say, I've updated my settings, and click verify integration. Now you've done that, flip back to the code and we'll put these in our environment. So the email server user will be the word API key. The password is that API key that they provided to you. Then the server host will be smtp.sendgrid.net. The port is what I described before, 587. The email from is the email that you want to send it from. So we'll just put jamesperkins.hey.com. And then that's it. We're all ready to go. Obviously, make sure that you still have this in there. And then we just need to make a few changes on our NextAuth here to handle that. So all these need to be changed from just empty strings to process environment. So the host will be obviously server host. The port will be server port. The user will be user. And the password will be password. So those are all the ones that we've handled. And then the from, which apparently I cannot spell, will be obviously the email from that you put in the environment. So once you have all of that, underneath this, but before this set of curly braces, we're just going to type the word database here. And then we're going to type the word type. I'm going to do SQLite. Database will be memory. And it needs 2 colons around it here. Like so. And then finally, we just need to do synchronized is true. Now, synchronize is a way of it updating immediately. So you want this set to false if you were using production data. But when we're doing testing, we want everything to be immediate. So now we have this. We can go ahead and test our email out and make sure that that works. And then once we've tested that, we can add in our Auth0 and they can handle everything for us. And we'll have a great old time integrating that. So back on the website, you can now see email has been added when you click the sign in button. So go ahead, type in your email address and hit sign in with email. What you'll get is this check your email address at the top. So go ahead, check your email and you should see a email from yourself. Obviously, if you've never sent an email before, maybe also check your spam because occasionally it will go in there. So here we have the email, localhost 3000, sign in, click this button. So I click this button and now we're signed in as the email that I sent to, and we can access the protected page. So now we have email functionality, we have Twitter functionality, we have GitHub functionality. But what if we just don't want to do this all ourselves, right? We just want Auth0 to handle everything for us through NextAuth. It's pretty great. So let's see how to set that up. So here we are in Auth0. We've signed in and I've selected the word application. Go ahead and click create application, and you want a regular web application. You don't want single web page, native, or machine to machine, and then give it a nice name. We'll just call this NextAuth. Then it's going to ask you what technologies, but you don't really need to worry about that because it's all handled through NextAuth. But what you want to click is the connections part here and make sure that we can use socials. So to change a social and add the ones that you want, you're just going to go ahead and click the connections button on the left, click social, and then add the ones that you want. So click create connection and then select one that you want to use. So for example, let's go ahead and add LinkedIn, click continue, and then we'll just close that for now. We're going to use the auth.def stuff, and we just want to make sure that you collect email addresses and hit create. And so you can do that for every single one, and then just make sure that you enable it for your applications. I have two here because one is the one that I've already previously set up, and the other one is the one I just showed you how to make. So go ahead and do that for all the connections that you need, and then all you need to do is enable it on the other side, and then NextAuth and Auth0 will just talk to each other immediately, and you'll have this fantastic, ready to use authentication using Auth0 and their fantastic technology, and it'll all be stored in one place versus doing it through multiple different areas, trying to remember which one of these developer passwords does what, etc. So let's move back into the code, add our Auth0 stuff in, which I need to explain to you, and then go from there. So inside your .env, you remember there's an Auth0 client, Auth0 client secret, and a domain. And when you sign up for your application under the settings tab, you'll have these three pieces that you need to place in: client ID, client secret, and domain. I can just quickly show you that in Chrome. Here you can see NextAuth, domain, client ID, and your client secret. Go ahead and take those down and drop them into your site here. Then all you need to do is add that into our NextAuth. And just like we've done providers before, it's just as easy. You're just going to do providers, Auth0. So we'll just put it under our Twitter here. So we can just do providers.auth0, open up this, and do client ID process.env auth0 client ID, and then one for the client secret and one for the domain. So we'll just drop these in here. Client ID, client secret, client domain. Now go ahead and restart your server and I'll meet you back on the page. So we're back on our sign in page, and now we have the ability to sign in with Auth0. So when you click this button, it's going to take you to Auth0 and it's going to show you all the socials plus the username and passwords that you can use. So let's go ahead and try and sign in with LinkedIn. Does anybody know their LinkedIn passwords these days? Let's find out. So we're going to sign in with LinkedIn because this is something we haven't done before. Auth0 would like to use your primary email addresses and the name in the photo. So let's click allow. And then it's going to ask if NextAuth, our application, is allowed to use this. Click tick. And as you can see now, I'm signed again with email for my email address and our super secret pages still work. So that's it. Auth0. You can just add every single kind of social that you need, and they'll handle everything for you. So today we've done Auth0, we've done GitHub, we've done Twitter, we've done emails, we've done everything that you could need for authentication, and we've probably written less than 50 lines of code. So that's the end of the video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to drop it a like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe, and if you want more content or a specific thing with Next.js or just web in general, just leave me a comment below and I will make sure that I read it, get back to you, and try and create a video. Until next time, see ya!